Welcome to the Nottingham Business School Business Leaders Podcast, where business leaders tell their stories and share their insights. All our guests have a personal connection with Nottingham Business School, so listen, learn, enjoy and share.
Welcome to another episode of the Nottingham Business School Business Leaders Podcast with me, Mike Sassi. Briscoe OBE has been the driving force behind ParalympicsGB for more than 2 decades. As Director of Sport at the British Paralympic Association, she's played a pivotal role in shaping the team's remarkable achievements and ensuring athletes with disabilities have the opportunity to excel on the world stage. Under her leadership, the ParalympicsGB team has been hugely successful at both Tokyo 2020 and Rio 2016, where it ended up second in the overall medals table. Penny's passion for inclusivity and her unwavering commitment to the Paralympic movement have won her respect across the globe. They've also helped Britain become one of the most successful teams in the world. This summer at Paris 2024, Penny, who lives in Nottingham, will again be team manager, or chef de mission, to use her full title. So Penny Briscoe, it's a great pleasure to welcome you here to the Nottingham Business School Business Leaders Podcast.
Great to be here.
So, thanks for sparing us your time, because I know you've been very busy. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going well. We're sort of just about 7 months to go to the opening ceremony of the Paris 2024 Paralympics, and there's some strange phenomena that as the clock ticks into that first moment of the Games year, everything seems to change. It's been busy, but then it seems to get even busier. So I've been back at my desk a month, and it's just been full on. I had one trip to Paris last week. I'm going back out this week, and we're always juggling multiple games. So we're not just focusing on Paris. We've got Milan Cortina as the next Winter Games, and I'm currently writing our best prepared team strategy for the LA 2028 Games. So it's never dull.
So you're juggling?
I'm absolutely, very good at juggling. It's a skill that I've developed over multiple game cycles. But yeah, Paris is looking good. I think that it's been a really interesting cycle in terms of we're very used to working in sort of 4, 5, 6 year cycles. So we could be on the ground 5 or 6 years ahead. And obviously with the sort of the COVID impact on Tokyo and the Games being pushed into 21, in effect, we lost a year of the Paris planning cycle. So it's been a truncated cycle. I think we learned an awful lot in the Tokyo cycle in terms of ripping up plans and starting again, and just actually being comfortable with that and being confident in our own ability to replan and regroup. So yeah, Paris is looking really, really positive, and I know the athletes are really excited, as are their families and friends, because it was a very quiet Games in Tokyo with no fans in the stadium.
Behind closed doors.
Behind closed doors. So with the proximity of Paris, we're hoping there's going to be lots and lots of Brits in the Paris environment and cheering us all on.
Indeed. Now, as chef de mission, you were very successful in Tokyo and in Rio. What are the particular leadership pressures of your role? I mean, the leadership starts, a significant period out, both in terms of my Director of Sport role, in terms of I lead ParalympicsGB's best prepared team strategy. So how do we go into every Games knowing the environment, being ready for the environment, because every Games is different, whether it's heat and humidity, whether it's the culture of the different host cities, whether the different competition programs, sport programs. So, that leadership journey is a long one. It doesn't just get plunked on you. Here's your folder. Take the team to the Games this week. It's a long way out as well, isn't it? I mean, you start preparing for this year's Games in...
Well, around 5 to 6 years. So we try, once the host city is announced, to get on the ground, get our towels down, if you like, and just really, I guess, embed ourselves in the culture, find out, make those relationships that ultimately come round to sort of hopefully bear dividends at games time. So it's a long journey. For me, it starts with how do we build a team? So we're bringing 23 different sport programs together, between 250, 300 athletes, another sort of similar number of staff. So we go from a very small BPA team support of around 40 people, and we grow that team to, well in excess of 600. So it starts with team identity and culture. What are our standards? What are our expectations? How do we want to turn up as a Paralympics GB?
So how do you lay that down over a period of 4 or 5 years, 250, 300 people, I think you were talking about there? How do you set down what you want?
I think that obviously part of being a leader is your vision. And I think I have a very clear vision in terms of how I think, Paralympics GB should turn up to the Games. And, we're a world-leading nation on the field of play, but I also expect us to be a world-leading nation off the field of play. So it's everything that we do in terms of, I guess, our standards of behaviour, how we engage with the different stakeholders, how we compete, how we deliver our individual roles as staff members. We did a brilliant piece of work going into Tokyo with our athletes commission called Winning Behaviours. So rather than having a code of conduct, I wanted to flip that on its head, rather than what we won't do or what you can't do as a team member, what we will do. So, what we want to see, what we want to hear, what we want to feel, and what we commit to.
Because that's interesting, because there were a lot of worries, complaints, a bit of griping from teams around the world at previous games, and I noticed that, and you made a big point of not getting involved in that. Of saying, always trying to get I kept seeing British Paralympians in front of the camera, always accentuating the positive, always saying, well, yes, whether it was accommodation or it was facilities or whatever, that was all part of that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you're referring to, obviously, Rio and Tokyo were different games, but the challenge with Rio was the city going bankrupt? Were the Paralympics even going to happen? Was the village and venues going to be ready? And I think in terms of my leadership in Rio, there was a deliberate move for me to be on the ground early, to try and quell some of the disquiet and feed positive messaging back into the team in the UK. But there were some challenges, and I think as a leader you want to try and absorb those and dissipate the challenges rather than put them onto other people. So we just had a plan in terms of me and my senior leadership team that when the athletes arrived, it would our accommodation, our building would look like a home from home, and there was a lot of hard work that went on behind the scenes. But when the athletes arrived, they wondered what the noise was all about, because we had a brilliant accommodation, and whilst other nations were bashing the organising committee, we tried to work with the organising committee, and we've got the resource to be able to do that. But for me, never dwell on the negatives, just try and take control and create the best possible environment that you can.
And do you think that impacts in the end of the medals tables? Both Paralympics, you were second in the medals table, 250, 300 medals perhaps. Do you think that is all has an impact? It feeds into that?
I think there's a bigger picture to understand in terms of the role that I play and my team contributes to, is that we have a strategy that talks about building the team. We have a strategy that talks about understanding the environment so that we all go in with the right toolkit to be able to deliver. We talk about being ready, so games ready for our roles, for the environment, for the team. And we have a very unique role in terms of leading and creating the environment. So all of that hard work, 5-6 years, whatever it might be, we create the environments where 23 different sport teams can thrive. So we talk about thriving in the team environment. So that's very much, the work that we do. And on a day-to-day basis, it's the work of the national governing bodies, the performance directors, the head coaches, the scientists, the administrators, the medics. So it's very much a team effort in terms of the sports leading their preparation and competition programs, and then us coming together as a one. But without that being a sort of harmonious one, I think it's very difficult for us to deliver that ambition, which is for us to thrive in environment and for us to have a positive team experience, as well as obviously being successful. So we don't just talk about success. So we want to perform well, but it's the how of our what. So do we win well? Do we have a positive team experience? And do we carry ourselves as that world-leading team on and off the field of play?
Okay, so let's go back to the beginning for yourself and your leadership. While you were at school, university, you canoed for Britain, you were an international sportswoman yourself. Then you went into a bit of secondary school teaching, but then you went back to be an international coach. How long did it take you to decide what you really wanted to do?
I think from a very early age, I love sport. I'm an absolute sports nut. I play it, I watch it. I'm a parent of kids that do sport and have done sport all their lives. So I think I really value sport, both in terms of, I guess the societal impact that sport has, and I guess in this day and age as well, health and well-being, both physical and mental, sport can play a huge role in that. So I really do believe in the power of sport. Back in the day when I was a sort of a mid-teenager, there weren't too many options. I wanted to do something to do with sport, but you really had sort of to be a PE teacher or maybe a physio. I definitely wasn't sort of intelligent enough to be a medic or anything like that.
But did you know that how do I put this without being crude? Did you know you'd be in charge? Did you know people would look up to you?
I've got some old pictures, probably from when I was 9, 10, 11, and I was the team captain at netball, and I'm there in the middle of the picture with a ball. And maybe, that was, I guess, the start of something that wasn't necessarily planned, but clearly I enjoyed being a leader. Maybe I was a little bit bossy, and I've certainly had to evolve in terms of my thinking, and I'm not always right, but yeah, so I went down the teaching route because I'd done some coaching alongside my paddling, and I obviously did a PGC at Loughborough. I did my teaching practice at West Bridgeford School. Had a brilliant time there, and that transition into a sort of a teaching role was quite easy. But I think that I didn't achieve what I wanted to do as an athlete. I never made the Olympics as an athlete. I competed for GB, but I didn't make that. That was the pinnacle.
So you're driven by a bit of unfinished business then?
Yeah, absolutely. And in 1996. A short-term contract came up at British Canoeing, and I'd been doing some coaching with the under 18s, under 23s, done some work at our home World Championships in 1995 with the team, and I got that role, and it was a huge leap of faith, and I think it wasn't something I'd done as an athlete, so I never committed to training full-time as an athlete. And you get into that lifestyle of you get your first job, you buy a car, there always seems to be commitments, and I never sort of was able to reel back from that. So you're training early, you're training late, it's not optimal, and I guess I sort of had regrets in terms of how I went about my sort of career as an athlete.
But you're taking a chance going from a very clear, potentially permanent job, clear teaching pathway, to taking a chance on a temporary contract.
Yeah, I loved my sport. It was all about an opportunity to be a coach, a professional coach in my sport.
A leader.
And I guess a step on the ladder of leadership, and it was an incredible year. We spent so many days away in America training and getting ready for Atlanta, and I knew that sort of I wanted to try and stay in sport rather than in education if I could, and there was a sort of an interim period of uncertainty where was my contract going to be extended, and it wasn't for a little while, but then lottery funding came in and British Canoeing was successful. We got onto that sort of lottery funding award system, and then I had a permanent contract, and sort of the rest is history, really.
So you were appointed director of the British Paralympic Association in the early 2000s. You were at the top of your profession. There weren't many women in administrative roles within sport, able-bodied or Paralympic. How was that?
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Mike. I think that even when I was in canoeing and coaching, there were so few females. You know, I think I was one of the few globally to be working on the sort of the circuit, if you like. You found a few more physios, going back to you teach or you're a physio. And then when I came across to ParalympicsGB in 2001, I had a manager post and my director left. And I was kind of in the driving seat, really. But I do think it's sometimes to do with timing, that at that point in Paralympic sport, that there wasn't the profile, and there were great athletes, there were great people, committed, passionate people, but there were 2 full-time roles in all of our sports at that time, one in athletics, technical director, one in swimming, in parasport, yeah, and they were both males. Okay. So for me to sort of secure that directorship was, I think, significant. But I think it was also a reflection on the movement, the Paralympic movement. It's a very welcoming movement. It's very inclusive by definition. It's different culturally. It's different structurally to the Olympic and professional sport structures.
But that's a role which you have shaped, haven't you? Because you've done it for 20 years. You've explained how it was in early days it was out on its own, but now you've built it into what it is.
Yeah, I think I just felt, I suppose, a different set of emotions. When I first arrived, I just assumed that Paralympic, Olympic were sort of parallel universes. But what I hadn't necessarily picked up is that the Olympic history was probably 100 years longer than the Paralympic history. And therefore it was far more developmental, and those first few months as a manager, it was like, crikey, this is a bit sport development and I'm not sure that's my skill set, and I did have some worries that I wasn't going to be able to sort of have an impact, and it was a case of, well, I can either moan and groan or roll my sleeves up, step inside into that sort of uncertain environment and try and make a difference, and I guess I've been striving to ensure parity in terms of the level of support for para-athletes, the sort of the expertise to be able to ensure that the programmes and the support and the funding are equitable to those on the Olympic programmes.
So, and an important part of that success has been your role as chef de mission at the 2 Paralympics. What difference did you bring in that role?
I think from my perspective, it's been very much about creating environments where both athletes and staff can thrive, never underestimating the hard work that goes into that journey, and wanting to ensure that we as ParalympicsGB actually create those environments where people can thrive and they can have a positive team experience, and I guess having that vision and wanting to pull out all the stops, so whether you're an athlete or a staff team member, you can deliver your personal bests, you can achieve and deliver against your dreams, and that is a hugely powerful driving force.
You must love it. I know that sounds like I don't mean to be trite, but your leadership is based on being a great team manager. You've talked and written about being a people person, about taking on a role that you love. You've done it you've done the overall Paralympics for 20 years, but as team manager at the last 2 Olympics, very, very successful. Is that an important part of it? The fact that you love it so much that you live and breathe it?
I love sport and I love the games, whether it's the 2 Olympic Games that I did as senior national coach in Atlanta and Sydney, and then however, I think it's 11 Paralympic Games, summer and winter. And just a sort of little anecdote, I was in Vancouver in 2010 and it was just set-up period, the athletes weren't in yet. And I stopped, I was walking around the village and I realised I was kind of bouncing. And I think it just sort of struck home how much I really enjoyed the Games environment and building, for that moment where, we create those incredible environments that are, whether it be the pre-Games prep or the Games time environments themselves that, really hopefully add value to athlete preparation and performance. So every Games is different. You know, I've had the opportunity to travel to North America and Europe and Asia. I love sort of being in different countries and sort of pitting your wits with the different cultures. So how do you, I guess, navigate to ensure that the outcomes that you're looking for are best for the team? So that can be challenging with different cultures, and that is in itself is brilliant. And every team is different. You know, I don't know how many athletes I've had the honour of leading and working for. But it's probably, you know, at least 1,000
Yes.
in terms of, there's about 50% turnover of athletes and staff every Games. And I think it feels like a real family parasport. And, you know, there's athletes I've known and staff members for 20 years, and they do feel like, you know, we're part of a family, and seeing how they've grown. You know, even Rich Whitehead, you know, obviously famous
Yes.
Nottingham athlete. I first
Gold
met him
medalist from Loudon.
in 2006, and he was playing ice sledge hockey. And then, you know, he transformed himself into obviously a marathon runner and then a sprinter, and just feel really privileged to be part of these athlete journeys and to see how they grow as humans as well as athletes.
Okay. I just want to ask you about dealing with disappointment, because there was one blip. You wanted to be chef de mission in 2012. You didn't get that job, and I think I've read something that you've written where you went back and had a reassessment because you wanted that role and it didn't quite work out for you. You dealt with that, came back even stronger, subsequent Olympics. I know that leaders often struggle to deal with change and disappointment. How did you do that?
Yeah, so the context there is that we got a new CEO in 2011. The previous CEO had been chef de mission, so had sort of combined a sort of business role with a team role. And our chief exec in 2011 decided that's not my skill set. I want to focus on the business. Great communicator, wanted to do both sort of national, international relations. So I thought I'd put forward a really strong case in terms of his options. If it wasn't going to be him, who it might be. And ultimately, he made a decision that didn't go in my favour, and I was just absolutely gutted. You know, it was our home Games. Could you imagine leading the team in London, leading the team out in a stadium filled with 100,000 adoring fans, and it sort of rocked me. And I did take a few moments to reflect, and what it ultimately came down to is what a hypocrite I would have been if I'd have walked away at that stage, because I love parasport. I love everything about the movement, and, you know, our home Games was hugely significant in terms of raising, I knew it was going to be hugely significant in terms of raising the profile of our athletes, of the British team, of the movement. And to have walked away at that stage would have, you know, my authenticity would have been questioned.
So it was just you know, how long did it take you in physical time to grit your teeth and get on with it?
Not very long. I got over it. You know, at the end of the day, you know, to be a good leader, it's not about you. It's about the team. It's about other people, and it's about, I guess, continuing to contribute. And so I just set my stall out that I was going to continue to be the best director of sport I could be, the best deputy chef de mission that I could be, and to see what happens.
You obviously did very well, because subsequently you were ragingly successful.
Yeah, and the guy that didn't recruit me in 12 then appointed me in 14, and it was, I can remember it to this day. He offered me the job in Starbucks in Birmingham New Street, and I did have a little cry, and that was just, for me, just a dream come true to lead one of the foremost global sports teams, and it was a dream come true.
What a fantastic story to say why you should, you know, get over your minor disappointments, grit your teeth, carry on. Wow.
Exactly.
So, as you know, this is a podcast on behalf of the Nottingham Business School, where there are many leaders and would-be leaders. If you were to offer one piece of final advice, leadership advice to all those people, what might that be?
I mean, I think leaders evolve. I'm a different leader now than that sort of 11-year-old kid holding a netball, and you know, there's a lot of water's gone under the bridge. So learn from your experiences. I think that the whole principle of valuing others is is absolutely mission critical. I think emotional intelligence in leadership. So know yourself, but know your team. And I think just be authentic. I think from my perspective, I bring some real old-fashioned values into my leadership style. So treat others how you'd like to be treated yourself. You know, punctuality, good manners, be courteous. But I also think, you know, that authenticity, and if it stops feeling really great to be a leader, then you're probably not doing justice to yourself or to the team that you're trying to develop, because ultimately leadership is about developing others, taking them on that journey, inspiring, creating a next generation of leaders. And I know there are at least half a dozen, if not more, people who are more than capable of stepping into my shoes at ParalympicsGB. So always keep an eye on who's coming up as well, and just never be complacent. So
yes. And perhaps be always looking towards the next leader, bringing on the next leader.
Absolutely. I mean, that is an integral part, I see it as my role, to inspire that next generation of leaders, but also supporters. You know, it's an incredible movement to be part of. I feel hugely proud. Never lose sight of the privilege of being a leader, and you know, just continue to look ahead, look to the future, and to being as good as you can be every single day.
Penny Briscoe, chef de mission at ParalympicsGB. Good luck in Paris, and thanks very, very much for being our guest on the Nottingham Business School Business Leaders podcast.